this module, we will learn the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs of the Plan Risk Responses process. Plan Risk Responses is the process of developing strategies that can minimize the negative effects of threats and maximize the positive effects of opportunities to the project. Response strategies should be developed and implemented in a timely and cost-effective manner. While this process should not typically be performed until after risk analysis processes have been performed, it should be performed iteratively from then on. One major input to the Plan Risk Responses process is the Risk Management Plan. This document should describe the planned approach to performing this process. Since risk planning is both sequential and iterative, the Risk Management Plan should describe when the project team is ready to begin planning response and under what conditions they will have to revisit identification and analysis. This may include a timing component that describes the planned interval of revisiting the process. Further, the Risk Management Plan should describe the roles and responsibilities of project stakeholders in response planning. Other relevant items in the Risk Management Plan can include definitions of risk thresholds and their relative urgency for responding to each. For example, it may be determined that all risks of low severity will simply be accepted. The risk register will also be a key input as it lists the individual project risks along with attributes such as priority, quantitative value, or risk owner. A risk owner is the person that is responsible for ensuring that an appropriate response strategy is selected for a particular risk and that the corresponding actions take place. The PMBOK guide outlines a few tools and techniques for the Plan Risk Responses process. These consist of various strategies which could be used to respond to various types of risk. We will explore these various strategies in closer detail. The first strategy to respond to a threat is risk avoidance. In risk avoidance, the project team somehow eliminates the threat so that it no longer affects the project. This will typically require a major change to project scope or another project objective, requiring key project stakeholders to agree via project change control procedures. For example, if a project is threatened by weather conditions disrupting product assembly, the project scope can be changed to move the assembly inside, thus eliminating or avoiding the risk. Or consider a security threat where sensitive project information may be compromised through an online attack. That risk may be avoided by storing all sensitive information in an offline environment. Since drastic changes to scope or other project objectives will usually not be ideal, another response strategy that can be used is risk mitigation. In risk mitigation, the project team will somehow reduce the overall threat to the project. Typically, this will mean reducing the probability, reducing the impact, or a combination of both. It is important to note that through mitigation, the risk is not eliminated, so it will still exist, just to a lesser extent. This may also require a change to project baselines, such as adding a new work package, which would be requiring key project stakeholders to follow normal change control procedures. Some examples include a project that is threatened by weather conditions may choose to reschedule the assembly to a season that is less likely to produce bad weather, or may purchase tarps and other protective equipment to reduce the impact of the weather. In the case of sensitive information, the team may install a firewall or encrypt the data to make it more difficult for an online attacker to gain information or make the information less relevant. In some cases, it may be difficult for the project team to directly manage the risk response, so they may choose to transfer the risk to a third party. In risk transference, the project team will agree to terms with a third party to bear the responsibilities of the threat, typically in exchange for compensation. Classic examples include insurance, extended warranties, and product guarantees. In the assembly example used earlier, a project team may choose to purchase weather-related insurance, which will cover the costs of a delay and/or damage, perhaps hurricane insurance. Our team with sensitive information may choose to buy a security product which guarantees the confidentiality of their information and takes responsibility for any associated liabilities. We will use different terms to describe the same basic concepts for handling project risks that present opportunity. Much like we can completely avoid a project threat, we can exploit an opportunity. Exploiting an opportunity means that the project team will ensure the opportunity actualizes. Much like avoidance, this will typically require some type of major change to project scope or other objective. For example, if our project has identified the opportunity to qualify for a financial incentive for obtaining certifications in green building, we can exploit the opportunity by completing training and certification to ensure the opportunity will be actualized. For times when an opportunity cannot be 100% exploited, we can enhance an opportunity by increasing its probability of occurrence or increasing its impact. This is effectively the opposite of mitigation, so typically this would also result in a change to scope or another project objective. For example, if we identified the opportunity to purchase land cheaper if a new zoning law goes into effect, we could either try to lobby more individuals to vote in favor of the law, or we could lobby to increase the amount of the incentive. In both cases, we would be enhancing the opportunity. If the project team is not prepared to directly manage the opportunity, they may be able to share in the opportunity with another organization that will also benefit and may be able to aid in the response. Sharing is essentially the opposite of transferring. For example, in the case of the zoning law, we may be able to team with other construction companies that would also benefit from the legislation and may be able to help us increase the probability or the impact. For some risks, opportunities, and threats, it may be nearly impossible to implement one of the responses described earlier, or not cost-effective to do so. In these cases, the project team may choose to simply accept the risk. Risk acceptance is when the project decides not to take any immediate action as a result of the project risk. A passive risk acceptance would be to document that the risk has been accepted and follow any monitoring and controlling procedures that may be described by the risk management plan. A more active risk acceptance may result in the establishment of a contingency reserve or a fallback plan. Some risks may extend beyond the scope of the project. For example, a project that is part of a larger program or portfolio may share risks with other projects, and therefore it would be more efficient for the program management team to manage the risk across multiple projects. Escalate is a technique to leverage organizational resources outside of the project team to manage the risk to the project. Some of the risk response strategies may result in taking actions that are dependent on the changing project environment. Contingency plans can be created to document the planned implementation of a risk strategy, known as a risk action, based on the occurrence of another event, known as a trigger. For example, a project team facing the threat of weather-related damage may choose to buy protective equipment only if the National Weather Service issues a hurricane warning. In this example, the action is buying protective equipment, which is contingent upon the trigger condition, the hurricane warning, taking place. Outputs include updates to the project management plan and project documents. This may require change requests when the scope, schedule, or cost baselines would be affected. Most importantly is updates to the project risk register. This will help the project team to track which risks have been responded to and which have not. Within the context of planning risk response, the risk register should be updated with the following: agreed upon response strategies, to include avoiding, mitigating, transferring, exploiting, enhancing, sharing, or accepting. Specific risk actions. These are the project tasks created to implement response. Since some strategies may include multiple actions, the term risk action owner can be used to assign responsibility of executing a single response. Trigger conditions can include possible events, symptoms, or other warning signs to monitor and control risk and indicate a timed implementation of response. Contingency plans and fallback plans both are created prior to the occurrence of the event. The implementation of a contingency plan may be based on the occurrence of a pre-event trigger or the occurrence of the risk event itself. The term fallback plan can be used to refer to a plan generated pre-event to deal with the aftermath of the occurrence of the event itself and failure of all other response strategies. It can be thought of as a plan B. Residual risks and secondary risks. A residual risk is any risk that is remaining after planned responses have been implemented. Residual risk is typical anytime the risk has been accepted. Residual risk will also exist in the case of mitigation, though to a lesser extent. A secondary risk is a term given to a newly discovered risk that is the result of a response to a different risk. Contingency reserves are cost or time values that are added to accepted baselines to plan for the potential occurrence of identified and accepted risks. Plan risk responses is the process of developing strategies that can minimize the negative effects of threats and maximize the positive effects of opportunities to the project. Response strategies should be developed and implemented in a timely and cost-effective manner. While this process should not typically be performed until after risk analysis processes have been performed, it should be performed iteratively from then on. Remember that plan risk responses is a proactive process. It focuses on what the project team can do before the risk event actualizes, rather than what to do after a risk event actualizes. It is important to be able to differentiate between the various response strategies.